I guess I am tonight's speaker, so thank you. Until we get that up, I personally like an informal presentation. So if you have questions, you have feedback, please jump in. Let's get the conversation going, right? Lecturing that way becomes much more available for everybody. Also, do we have people who like chocolate in the audience? Okay, I'm going to bribe you to do a demonstration at the end of tonight's presentation, all right? So hopefully we'll get some volunteers up and going. So anyway, this is a peer-to-peer human trafficking prevention program. It is founded based on evidence-based research from more than 100 peer-reviewed journal articles covering different studies areas such as human trafficking, education, psychology, social anthropology, and education. Okay? This is a quote from a survivor. When we talk about prevention, one of the things we really have to aim at are the risk factors that youth are facing. Quite often we go global and we have to be much more specific. Right? So for example, during COVID, according to FBI data, online grooming went up 800%. You match that with the increase of social isolation, alienation, depression, and you have a potent combination for youth to be trafficked. So one of the things, one of our modules is how they can identify they're actually being groomed online and what the techniques are. Right? Another one would be what we call body autonomy, which is how do youth learn to draw boundaries to say no to adults they trust? Quite often the manipulation is along the lines, you know, we've done these favors for you, we've helped you out, you got to do a little something for us. That's the lead-in. We try to teach them through this module. The answer is no, 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 and draw those boundaries as tight as you can. The other half is what we call protective factors, which does not get enough coverage. So the research shows the number one protective factor for youth to be trafficked is having one supportive adult in their life, whether it's a parent, a caregiver, or a mentor. It is critical. I know everybody here is part of that picture, so that's great. The question is, how do we expand that picture? Well, we talk about that in one of the modules. Another aspect of the same way is not discussed much, but one of the other great protective factors is school connectedness. Whether that's through a counselor, a teacher, peers, a club, whatever it takes to keep that youth engaged in school is a primary preventive factor against being trafficked. I did decide to pick out one piece of research for everybody, so after this, there's no more research, okay? If you can see the name of the article up there, it's Survivors' Conceptualization of Human Trafficking Prevention and Exploratory Study. What the authors did was interview strictly those who survived trafficking. And the basic question was, what measures, if any, could have been in place at the time of your entry into trafficking that would have prevented you from being trafficked? So they came up with 10 variables. On the left side, you see importance. On the right side, you see feasibility of implementation, right? From ascending top to a descending order of value is what they came up with. Notice, both for importance and feasibility, it is education and awareness. And this is validated by numbers and numbers of other studies. Okay? So our program is supposed to be educational, but we take a really different approach than what's out there. Here's our mission statement. It's really simple. So I'll give you a moment to read that. Oh, we are recording it, so I'll read it. So, empowering young individuals with the knowledge and abilities to identify and combat human trafficking while promoting resilience, positive relationships, and effective coping mechanisms. Okay? I will get out of the way because pictures are being taken. All right. We're good? Here we go. This is about the program. Now, the first two bullet points up here indicate how we're going to approach this. So we're talking about experiential learning and utilizing the creative arts, and we will get into more detail in a few minutes. But again, going back to these two bottom ones, right? Intellectual and psychological means to protect themselves. Basically, we're talking about healthy relationships, right? Youth do not understand who are at risk between an unhealthy relationship and a healthy relationship, considering most of them to some degree have, quote, attachment issues. So if they find an adult that shows an interest in them, that makes them false promises, that can induce them one way or another, they will attach to that person, and that becomes the road downhill. So part of the things we teach for healthy relationships is communication skills, how to develop empathy, how to slowly gain trust and nurture a relationship, versus the other realities are, how do you know you're in an unhealthy relationship? How do you identify that you are either being undermined, manipulated, or controlled? And if so, how do you extricate yourself out of that situation? So that in itself is a separate module. Right? Again, navigating the manipulations of traffickers. Here we're talking about, again, predominantly grooming techniques, how to identify them, how to combat them. But the other part we have to look at is adolescents are going severe neurobiological changes. So it predisposes them to risk-taking and impulsive decisions. We created a whole program in one module that gives it a contrasting stimulus. So we teach what's called value-based decision-making. So in other words, we take them through a workshop where they start to discover their own values, their own internal moral compass of sorts, and then they start going, how do I make decisions based on that? What context am I in now, and how do I do with that? And we also teach it in relationship to the fight or flight syndrome that most of these kids are in. So they can start identifying what they're in, which stage of fight, flight, or fright, as well as, okay, now what's the values here? Now how do I make decisions? So it's a true slowing down process, much more than the immediacy of instant gratification. Okay, here's the basic program structure. It's 9 modules, 11 workshops, depending how we set it up. It's weekly or bi-monthly. We see the length, duration. I want to touch upon the journal between workshops. This is really a critical piece. Each participant is given a journal. In between workshops, they are asked to write down their experiences, and as they get distance from the workshop, their own self-reflections of the information they received, what their experiences were, what the relationships between the two are, and then what you gained from this, how would you package that, consolidate it, and present it to your peers who are not receiving this information? So simultaneously, while they are being educated, they also become advocates against human trafficking with the peers. So we're creating a dual edge to the journaling process. All right? And yes, each module can be conducted, so when people look at what we have, they say, these seem to be the 3 most important modules we can do because we have limited time and space. No problem, we can give that to you. We can help you out with that. Okay, we all know how important safe space is. Now, this slide and the next slide will show you the general rules we go by. What's important to recognize for those who are working in this program is we don't know these participants' personal history. So they could have been abused or personally and presently being abused. They could have been trafficked. They could be trafficked at this point in time. We don't know. So it's really important that we keep these rules intact. All right? The other thing is these rules are malleable depending upon the group's needs. So one of it is we have a type of written agreement in the air. Do we agree to these rules? Yes, sign your name. We'll agree. But if they find the rules aren't good enough or they like some kind of alteration of the rules, we put it up to vote. Because each group develops a different identity. They all have specific histories. So we need to be flexible and adaptable to what their needs are. There's also the concept of personal safety. What does that mean? We try to educate each of you are personally responsible for your levels of comfort in the modules and in the workshops. We can't always determine it. So we ask you, as soon as you get to that part of the barometer where you don't want to go any further, let us know. The odds are you're not the only person who's feeling that way. There's other people. Now I know, as we say, we're dealing with introverts who may not want to speak up. We've also been working with individuals who are afraid to speak up. They're afraid of stigmatization, ostracization, right? Feeling shame if they do so. We present the workshops with these safety mechanisms ahead of time. We try to inform them this is a common experience for those who have been through hard times. So that's the first part. The second part is, anybody who runs the workshop has got to be trauma informed. So the reason for that is you can run a workshop with, say, a dozen youth. But if you're sensitive to the energies in a group, you can start to feel which ones are pulling back, which ones are reluctant to speak. So if you see that and it feels like it's starting to permeate the group, what's the first thing to do? Hey everybody, 5-10 minute break, get something to drink, get a bite to eat, and then gently we walk over to the person and just start a casual conversation. How are you feeling? What are you thinking about the progress of the group? Do you have anything you want to share with me? Make the personal connection with that individual youth. Simply because at that point in time, they're afraid to speak up, or they're getting stirred up by the material because some of it is sensitive, that we have an obligation to them to slow it down, help them feel involved with the group, and take it at a different pace. Like I said, all the workshops we have flexibility and adaptability built into them depending on the group needs. Okay, now we can talk about experiential learning. When you look at the research data comparing experiential learning to traditional pedagogy, the outcomes are measurable and they are superior to traditional teaching methods. The one that caught my eye, which is most important, is that first one, engagement. How hard is it to get youth engaged in school? To sit there and listen to someone like me blather on, blah, 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 and they're gone. Because they have so many other things going on with them. So it becomes really important we look at that. Here's the other part that's really important with experiential learning. When we look at schools today, we all know the budgets are getting cut. What is the first thing that gets cut?
The arts.
The arts. Theater, chorus, choir, orchestra, right? Anything that is creative, imagine, and then sports is the next thing that gets cut. Where's the emphasis? On STEM. Well, what about the kids who are at risk and they're not inclined to deal with STEM? What happens? They become further disconnected from school. They go at higher risk, and the odds of trafficking go up. So the whole idea is to create a program that is not lecture-based, that is not didactic. So we do that through the creative arts. So if you look at the module and the model for experiential learning, you notice is participate, engage, have an experience, reflect on that experience. And since we have a number of modules that are skill building based, right? When they write in their journals, they come back next week, okay, open up with the group and the opening question. What happened this week? Did you try the skill? Did you not? Did it work? Did it not? What do you think the reasons are? If it's something on our end, let us know. We're going to recreate this so it does work for you. If it didn't work on your end, you think because you're not that good at it yet, let's take the time and let's get better at it. So the opening of every module takes on the preceding module for the journal writing of these individuals, so the connection stays throughout the whole process. So that's the basic, and when you look at the changes, what you're really looking at is a psychological maturation that is occurring. Yeah. No.
I think this is great. My question is, and I think this would be really, really good, and I'm sure you might talk about it later, in juvenile detention centers and group homes, for those who are really, really at risk.
Right.
Would there, do you think, be, I guess, a difficulty implementing like a continuum-based course because they are kind of in and out more?
It would be difficult.
Okay.
However, the good news is each module can stand by itself.
Okay.
So let's assume they attend the third module, which is online grooming, right? But they can't get there to the fifth module, last one, healthy relationships. So ahead of time, we have an executive summary written out, and I believe I have sent that over to Kathy. You have it, so if people want it, feel free to email it to them. It gives the outline of everything we do in the bullet points, right? So you can see how it's set up independently as well as integrated, right? Because each one carries its own weight. Each one's a risk factor base. So that's a really good question, and yes, we can work with it. However, when you go into those places, the people who are running it have got to be much more sophisticated about running dynamics, because the issues are going to come up really quickly. So you have to, when those issues come up, the beauty of this is it's psychologically therapeutic without it being psychotherapy. Right? You're not having them talk about their issues, so it may come up. But there's a concept in the old psychoanalytical school called the intolerable image. What does that mean? That incidents that happen to people that throw them into shock, that throw them into PTSD, cetera, they can't directly go at that information. It just creates too much triggers. So you go through a third party, a third way. This is based, I know, I'm getting a little off track, but it's based on the mythology of the Medusa, right? You look at Medusa, what happens? You get turned to stone. How does Perseus kill Medusa? Through the reflection of the shield, never looks directly into the eye. So we can use things such as storytelling. You can use things such as movement. You can use meditation. You can use journal writing. So again, we can help them mature psychologically without having to do straight face-to-face talk therapy. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Any questions about that? Okay.
How to do it?
That-
That'd be a big question.
That is the second stage. Once we get this piece going, where I do want to train people. And my personal, if I can have this down the road, I'd like to do, I would like people who have been trafficked doing this. Because they will carry a lot more authority than I will. I would like to be the support net for them. Things come up, you give me a call, let's talk it through, let's get help. The other thing I want to do, because it's called peer-to-peer, one is called peer-to-peer because they're working together to build their relationships. The other is, if I can get young people over the age of 18 trained to do this, then when they talk to 16 and 15-year-olds, they don't want to speak to an old person like me. Let's be realistic. They'd rather speak to somebody who knows their culture, who knows their music, right? If I tell them, yeah, man, I love The Who, and they're going to go, what? It's not going to work. Maybe the Beatles, maybe the Stones, right? If they explain some music to me, I'm going to go, yeah, I heard it. No. So it's important we get a little bit, I hate saying using the word, but get an army of young people who really want to advocate for this cause and get them involved. Now we go to the creative arts. This information comes out of the research on the success of art therapy. Many times what these individuals are dealing with is so potent and so difficult to express, it goes beyond language. So if we take them into the imagination, where they can think symbolically, whether they use meditation, drawing, making up their own storytelling, improvisational work, right? It creates enough distance between them, the sensitivity of the material, what they've been through, where they can move gradually into it, right? So if you notice some of the things that are beneficial, the odds are the youth are going to fit one or more of those categories. And here are some of the creative arts we use. I'm sure these are all familiar to you, and there are more to use, but these are the most commonly used ones we do. So some of our modules will have more than one of them. Most of them will have at least one thing, right? And tonight, let's see which one we're going to use. Right? We're going to do a warm-up, and we're going to do some, we don't going to have it up there technically, yeah, we do. We're going to do improvisation tonight. I know, I saw some faces going, not me, not me. Yes, you. Yeah, we're going to get you all hooked up so you can, because one of the thing is, none of us grew up with experiential learning. We all sat at desks. We were all lectured to. We all did homework. We did things by rote. We did things by memory. We were not taught critical thinking while going through school. I just finished the master's program. They did not go into critical thinking. They said, yes, we'll do critical thinking, but critically think the way we think. So me being who I am, we had some butting heads, so it worked out just fine. Now I'm going to talk about what the module structure is, each workshop. So we do an introduction to the theme. The facilitator will share their name and say, tonight's theme is on XYZ, and we will do a specific workshop after this to break it down. Right? You have an opening question, which is, again, the individuals introduce themselves, and they give a one-word or one-image answer to whatever that question may be. Then we do warm-up on icebreakers. I know people in the audience who hate doing those, but it's not one of those that tell me how you feel icebreakers. It usually, most of the time, is getting the body up and moving. One of the things the research shows, again, is, believe it or not, when people stand to study, they learn more effectively than when they sit to study. Because you're integrating certain parts of the brain into the learning process, right? So you're not using just the frontal cortex. You're using other things that help you stand upright, that help you balance, that help you coordinate. So literally the information goes into the body, not just into the brain. And that's the whole idea. Has people heard of the concept of cell memory? when we talk about trauma in the body, how does that happen? How does it get into the body? Because before we learn to speak, everything is visceral. And before we learn language, we think in images. So the idea is the more you get the body involved in learning, the better people learn. Okay, we go through the workshop, summation. At the end of the workshop, what do? We started here, we went over here. What were the main things we take away from the arc of today's workshop? What are the bullet points that stand out for you? What were your experiences? And what of this would you want to package, consolidate, and share with your peers? Again, we're going back to when you leave today, are there things you can share with your peers that are critically important to them? The facilitator then takes all that information, summarizes it, reflects it back to the group in several sentences they agree upon, and that's the end. However, working with youth is different than working with adults. So we do a closure. And it's not like, does anybody have any other questions? Thank you very much, we're closing. No, we put it back into the body. So what I've done in the past with youth is we get everybody standing up in a circle, we have them link up with hands, we go through several stages of gratitude. So the first one is this. Anybody who's had a bad week this week, whether you've dealt with home problems, school problems, lost a job, broke up a relationship, any bad thing that wants a little extra love and support in their lives, you can either stand in the center of the circle or put your name in the middle of the circle. Also, for friends and family, you know who are having a tough time, same thing. Put their names in the center of the circle. At that point in time, we take about 10 seconds of silence to pass out positive vibes to the center of the circle, send out prayers to the center of the circle, and that's the first phase that's completed. Second phase, all right, who had a good week? We want to celebrate you. Because how often are youth celebrated anymore? How much of it take time? That's great, as opposed to what the hell did you do wrong? Criticism is so easy to do, but positive reinforcement makes such a difference. So if you have a birthday, if you passed your test, if you got a job, if you had a good week at home, all of a sudden somebody you're interested in becomes your friend. Fantastic. We want to help support that happen. So you, again, stand in the middle of the circle or put your name in the middle of the circle. And then anybody you know in your life who also is having some positive vibes, we want to reinforce it. So what do? Put their name in the circle. We follow through with a 10-second quiet, again, send out positive vibes, send out prayers, however you want to do it. We complete it. We link up. We do a third one, right? The three things repeated in different ways definitely have shown to reinforce what you're learning. We do gratitude to each other for supporting us, having each other's back, as well as gratitude for the space for us to be here tonight. You link up, and this is a little different, and if you ever get to see this, I can tell you this is absolutely cool and uncanny. And I've done this with groups as big as 40 to 50 kids. Get them up in circles, say, close your eyes. Now, I want you to feel the vibe in the room and how connected you are, everybody. And when you're ready and you feel the group is ready, slowly bow with your eyes closed to the center to give gratitude. Slowly come up. And I can tell you, I've seen 40 to 50 youth do this in unison with their eyes closed. When they see that happen, and because they'll cheat as they come up, they want to see. They come, they go, yo, look at that. Everybody's coming up. It starts to help them realize the connections happening in the group go beyond the lessons that are being taught. It helps solidify the idea of a community that's being developed. And for kids who feel isolated, alienated, depressed, outcast, outliers, what could be a better experience? Now, they're going to fight that feeling. That's okay. We got 8 more workshops to do. You're going to catch on. We're going to be good, right? So that's the idea behind that. And again, they get a journaling assignment. Okay, so let's go through a quick, this is our first workshop. This is the easiest one. This is more of a factual workshop than anything else we do. So, opening question. State your name and one thing you know about human trafficking. We don't ask them if it's true or false. Just what do you think? Or what's an image in one word? Our icebreaker warm-up is a little different. This one is not an embodied one. We put up 2 big pieces of butcher block paper on the walls. Okay? Everybody gets to throw out randomly. What do you know as a fact about trafficking? What do you think is a misperception about trafficking? Facts on one, misperception on the next. And then we do a little mini kind of human trafficking 101 with the kids. Here's the reality. Here's how social media plays into it. Here's how the media plays into it. Here's what we think about, oh, it's only about young white girls being kidnapped and chained. No. The fact that 75% of trafficking is labor trafficking, they have to learn that piece. Right? So we go through a whole easy introduction to it. So when we're done with that, again, we go back to discussion, round robin. How do we get these facts out to your friends? How do we consolidate this into good sound bites that make them, that's what that is? Wake them up, get them going. The idea in this is to first shift consciousness about trafficking. Not to give the answers to everybody, but can you catch your friend and wake them up? Oh, I just did this workshop, I can't tell you, this thing was flat. We learned this. Great, good. If each of these kids were to go out and talk to at least one friend after every workshop, that means they communicated with 11 different people over the course of 3 to 4 months. If we're right and 10% picks it up, one out of that, if we have a dozen participants, 12 more kids now are socially conscious about trafficking. That's the importance of constantly iterating and journaling and discussing it as they develop into advocates against human trafficking. Okay? Then we discuss how to get that out. Then we make it fun and try to make it fun. We put them into a game show situation. Originally this was for teachers versus students, but we can just do just them against each other. And it's a combination of Family Feud versus Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And then each round, we do about 3 rounds, we change the rules. And eventually the last round is, they get to ask the other side the question, and they try to bluff them. So we keep amping up, changing dynamics to keep them engaged. Okay? Then again, we go through a summation process we discussed, and here's the outline again. We talk about foreclosure. If the research is accurate, this is the outcomes we're going to get. Now again, the one thing that's not in the literature, but I'm basing on my own personal experience working with youth, is that if we have the same basic number of youths coming in throughout the whole program, at the end of the program, they don't want to stop. You go, what's next week? Well, the program's over. I know, but what's next week? And so the idea becomes, if they stay with the program, and because they're going to develop new friendships, relationships, and have a different type of bonding than they're used to. There's a part that we haven't written out yet, but basically says, then we do a group project with all this information. So what do you think would be a great group project for youth? How about you'll get together and do a 15-second TikTok PSA on trafficking? What do you think about that? Cool. All right, who wants to do it? You all get together, figure it out, come back to us with, before you do it, your game plan. Outline it like a storyboard. How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? Great. We put it up. If they get the number of hits that gets them excited, guess what? Can we do another one? Can we do another one? Sure you can. But how about we do a bigger one? What do you mean? 30 to 45 seconds to a 60-second PSA. Throw it up on YouTube. Let's see what happens. All of a sudden, if they get to their peers and this thing takes off, I don't care if it has just, say, 250 hits. So what? 250 more kids are now aware about human trafficking. How do you know? If 2 of those reach out to these kids, where'd you learn this? What do we do? How do we protect? All of a sudden now, you have a rippling effect into the community of kids learning about trafficking. We did one thing that went even bigger than that. Let's assume we get a group, let's say you get 15 kids over a few runs of this that want to do something big. Okay, let's get a hold of the town council. Let's fix the people. You got a blank wall we can make a mural out of? Really? And then what you do with that blank wall and they're ready to make a mural? What do you want the image to be? Which one of you are great taggers? Who knows how to do the artwork? Okay, great. Which one of you want to get in publicizing this to the public? Who wants to contact the local journalist? Great, that's your assignment. On and on and on. And guess what you do when that thing starts getting painted? You film it. You film it. Day after day after day, you watch it increase. You can film kids going to speaking to journalists so they get on it, kids who are organizing behind the scene, right? Name me one kid who doesn't want to be on camera. You get that part going, and then all of a sudden, we edit it. What do you do with it? Wherever they decide they want to put it, that's where it goes, because it's their project. So the key is, while you're building this community, guess what else you're building? Ownership. It's now their program, it's not my program. And they get to alter the workshops in ways that make sense to them. So the whole idea is creating something flexible, adaptable, that engages them and makes them want to come back and makes them feel like they're part of something important. Because there's one thing we all want to be, is we want to belong to something that's bigger than we are. That has a, quote, I hate using the word, it's a transcendent quality of human beings, is we want to belong to something bigger than who we are. And we want to contribute. And I can tell you from experience working with youth, as much as they have cursed me out, as much as they have challenged me, as much as they couldn't stand my guts, the fact that I show up every single week, 2-3 times a week in that space, I became somebody they trusted when things went bad. When things weren't bad, they hated me. Discipline. I don't want to be disciplined. Sorry. Everybody's held to the same rules. Just like our safe space rules. You breach the safe space rules, we don't punish you. We have a conversation with you. We let you know how that behavior harms other people and takes away from them. Then the question becomes, what do you think you could have done differently in that moment when that impulsive nature rose out? Do you want to talk about what triggered that? So yes, it becomes a group dynamic, but we also have to remember it's personal for every single kid there, and we have to learn how to address that. Okay, demonstration time. Now I noticed it got more quiet as soon as I said demonstration time. So the idea is we're going to do a demonstration from one of the workshops that's on communication skills. I believe we all think we're really good at communication. We really listen. We take to heart what people say, and then we try our very best to communicate in a non-violent way back with that person, except when we get angry. Right? But this technique we're going to show you stops the anger from happening. And it creates space for the people to interact. So, fundamentally, there's two things when you do improv work. One, when somebody shares something with you, like, oh, I noticed you got a new pair of glasses. You can't say, no, I didn't. You have to, yeah, I got a new pair of glasses. Well, I got them because the old pair broke. So the idea is you never refute what's being given to you. So even if a person says, why are you wearing 3 shoes? You better come up with something very imaginative to explain why you have 3 shoes. Okay? In this scenario, we're going to create a conflict. Simple conflict, and we can talk about conflicts that adolescents have because we're going to be working with youth. One person is going to be the antagonist, which means you don't have to follow the rules of communication that we're going to show you. The other person is going to have to follow the one simple rule we're going to give you. And that one simple rule is the pronoun you cannot be used in any type of conversation other than in a question. So would you be willing to repeat that? Do you recall what I said back then? Because as soon as we say to the person, you said this, the finger goes forward, it's an accusation, and the defensiveness comes up. Now, the hard part is talking to somebody who doesn't know these rules. They're not going to play by the rules. Guess what? It doesn't give you permission to go over to the other side. You have to stay with who you are and the rule that goes. Does that make sense with people? Nobody's exhaled since I started. There is chocolate. Can I bribe people? It's really. By the way, are people familiar with this chocolate? No? This is one of the few child labor-free chocolates out there. And if people want to know, John Oliver did a special on this about a month ago. So you can go on YouTube and watch pop in John Oliver, child labor chocolate, and you'll get a half-hour education about how this came about and what's going on in the world with chocolate. Granted, those of you who do not like expletives, John Oliver likes to throw them in now and then, just so warning on themes. But it's a brilliant piece of information out there. By the way, a week prior to that, he did one on labor exploitation also. So it is getting out there, the information. So I just want to ask, you all want to try a warm up before we go into this?
Does anybody want to?
Talk about a room of introverts. God, somebody help me. Do we want to try a simple warm up before this? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay? So, what's a great communication skill warm up, you think? Let's think about kids' games. What's a great kid game that deals with communication skills?
Telephone.
That's one. We're going to make one a little harder.
That's hard.
Because we know how that ends up, right? You start with, hello, how are you? And it's like, yeah. So we don't do that. How about last time anybody played Simon Says? Now the reason we do Simon Says is because telephone, you can sit there and whisper, right? There's no body movement. Simon Says forces you to do body movement. Now as soon as I said Simon Says, did everybody feel that little kind of come up in their bodies from memory? Gotta get up, gotta move. That's the biochemistry changing to get the brain ready to learn, right? When you look at brain pathways of chemistries, the one thing that's critical to learning is really a neurochemical called epinephrine and norepinephrine, what we know as adrenaline, noradrenaline. And its focus is in the frontal lobe. But when you get the body in, it goes all over the brain. Right? So are we willing to try a quick game of that?
Yes.
Thank you. Now the deal is, we're going to have 3 winners that get chocolate bars. Now the deal is, I gotta get you all out in 2 minutes. Or less. You're like, how is he gonna do that? Don't worry about it. So, instead of moving the chairs, everybody willing to go over to the space over there, and we'll try a quick game or two for warm up, then we'll get into the demonstration.